just feel free, in summary, if you have questions for the speakers. This is also a learn and share. So we're not claiming on our parts that we know everything. So if there's something you need the speakers to clarify, don't hesitate to raise your hand or put it in the chat box. Just a brief overview shortly. You will be hearing me talk about Climate Pact in Ireland. What exactly is this Climate Pact, just in case you're joining this launch talk for the first time? And then you're going to be hearing from one of our Climate Pact ambassadors, Dr. Alison Gilliland, who will be talking about gender-sensitive transport planning, followed by Cian Gill, who is a Climate Action Officer, Waterford City and Council. He's going to be sharing the Waterford Metropolitan Area Transport Strategy, followed by Onyedikachi Onwusor, who is also an energy engineer here at Southeast Energy Agency. He's going to be talking to you about a project he's been working on for a very long time, Behavioural Change, the Greener HGV Programme. In between, if you have questions for the speakers, you don't have to wait till the end of all the presentations to ask your questions. So just a bit about, I'm not going to stay too much on this slide. We are probably already familiar with the EU climate law. We know that by 2030, the goal is to have emissions cut by at least 50%. You might be like, oh, 2030, it's still far. Well, that's in 5 years' time. And 30% of EU expenditure up until 2027 is still going to be going to climate-related projects such as this, the EU Climate Pact. And hopefully, by 2050, we will all be able to achieve climate neutrality. So when you talk about the European Climate Pact, it's, I would say, me, you, everyone. It's just a movement of people who have come together. There's a shared goal, a shared mission. We want a more sustainable Europe. We want to help EU to become climate neutral by 2050. So the Climate Pact on its own just presents an opportunity for people to learn and share, know about what's the climate issue, how can we bring about a change in our own little space, what are other ways we could connect with other people. Can we connect with other people already in these spaces working on this? Sometimes collective actions actually help to achieve the greater good. So the objectives of the Climate Pact basically is to raise awareness, inform people about what's going on. If there are funding opportunities, we let you know the funding opportunities. We amplify the voices of people working in the climate space, and of course, encourage people to take action. Now, our role in Southeast Energy Agency is to serve as a country coordinator for the entirety of Ireland. So what we do is we connect people who are already working on Climate Pact projects, and we connect you with individuals, we connect you with the government, we connect you with local authorities, basically everyone working in the climate space. We are like the connecting point, and then we build on what already exists. We're not trying to establish new things or create some other new things. That we're just working with people already in these spaces. And shortly, I'll be talking to you about what we have. That's the Climate Pact ambassadors. So far in Ireland, there are 29 ambassadors. Sometime, I think last week of January, we had about 14 new ambassadors joining our community. Still growing, but I think we're done with getting people for the rest of the year. Just in case you're wondering, how can I be a Climate Pact ambassador? This is just an overview of some of our ambassadors. And these people are made up of CEOs, politicians, researchers, scholars, artists. We pull from everywhere. We try to ensure there's representation from everywhere possible. And yes, we've not covered all the counties, but so far we have ambassadors in Cork, Waterford, Wexford, Carlow, Kilkenny, Tipperary, Dublin, Meath, Wicklow, Mayo, and Galway. And if we do have a project extension, we might just have to spread our wings as well into other places as well. So I think I've been talking. It's time for you to get to hear the speakers we have lined up for you today. First, you'll be hearing from Dr. Alison Gilliland. She is a European Climate Pact Ambassador, and she has a background in education and training, trade unionism, equality, as well as politics at local and EU levels. She was also the deputy head of the European Committee of the Regions delegation to both COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh and COP28 in Dubai. So she's passionate about the role of local authorities in climate action on a fair and just transition. I'll just stop here now because of time. But in case you're wondering, would you get this presentation? How do we go about it? Don't worry. At the end of the presentation, we're going to share the slide with you. And this meeting is recorded, which means it's also going to be available post-production on our YouTube page. Doctor is going to be talking to you about gender-sensitive transport planning. Thank you so much, Doctor. I think I am done sharing my screen at this point. So yes, you can go ahead.
Thanks very much, Edema. And Alison is fine without the doctor. I rarely use it. It's my very great pleasure to be here with you all and share with my colleagues presenting today, and also to be an EU Climate Pact Ambassador. I suppose it arose from my work as a local councillor in Dublin City Council and on the European Committee of the Regions. I have a few passions: climate, housing, and gender. And I think gender and climate intersect very well. And particularly when it comes to transport planning. And we all know that transport is one of the key areas that is being targeted for emissions reduction. We want more people to get out of their cars and get onto cleaner, greener public transport. We want them to cycle and we want them to walk. And I suppose, why do we talk about gender in that context? I think historically our transport systems and our transport vehicles have been designed by men for men who commute. So it's very much seen as a way of getting people from their homes to work and back again. But when we talk about mobility and gender, can you see my next slide? Yeah. Men and women have very different needs. So as we know, the majority of women, not exclusively, but women and families tend to have that primary care responsibility for children from when they're infants, getting them to and from school. They also tend to take on more responsibility for caring for another adult, and that tends to be an older parent or maybe a disabled sibling. And women are also more conscious than men when traveling alone, particularly at night. And this sort of difference in lifestyle means for women, our journeys tend to be shorter and more frequent. Arriving on time, whether that be for school start, school pickup, is really, really important. And our journeys often involve younger children, more elderly or frail adults, disabled children, and bags, buggies. Like, we tend to travel with stuff and with others, and safety is also a concern for us. When it comes to climate, evidence shows that women on average care slightly more about the environment and have stronger pro-climate opinions and beliefs. And that means that there's a tendency more among women than men to make that shift, to be conscious of the environment and make the shift towards recycling, to using active travel and being more climate friendly. As the primary caregiver and influence on young children, they also have an influence on how children interact with the environment. Mobility habits are laying down really early in life. So if children get used to being ferried about in cars, that will almost become their expectation and it's harder to shift. But if children, when they're young, are used to going with their parents on public transport, used to cycling, used to walking, that becomes their natural habit and their go-to mode of transport, which ideally is what we want. So shift people that are currently using cars onto, but inculcating younger people that it becomes the norm and more natural for them to use public and active travel. So I'm going to focus some of my talk on a brilliant piece of research that was done by Transport Infrastructure Ireland back in 2020. And they did some research into the difference experiences between men and women when it comes to traveling and transport. So they did some desktop research. They then did some qualitative surveys, sent it out to 1,000. So 500 men, they got 500 men responses, 500 women responses, more or less. So there's a good comparison there. And then they followed that up with 21 interviews so that they could get dig really down into women's experience. And those interviews had a great sample of diversity: young women, older women, women with families, young families, older families, caring, and women that don't have children. So if you look at the I suppose what women were telling us there, you can see there are 5 key areas for consideration: safety, accessibility, reliability, convenience, and comfort. And one of the top, I suppose, complaints from women is limited public transport in my area. So I suppose when you look at the big urban centres, there is more of a choice. But when it comes to more rural areas, there's less of a choice. And I know in the last 3-4 years, particularly under the last government, there was a huge amount done with introducing the local link and introducing rural transport. Transport being too slow, pick-up points being too far away from my house, and overall it being too inconvenient. So if you do have to get to school on time and bring the kids, that's a consideration. The bus stop or the train station may be too far away. They may not be able to walk that far. If you want them to cycle, there may not be cycling parking for them to get it. So it becomes something that's inconvenient. Then if we look at safety in particular, and I suppose I can very much empathize with this because I go through it a lot of the time. Women tend to feel unsafe, particularly at night, open spaces, walking from A to B. So walking from your house to the bus stop or the train station. When you get to that bus stop or train station, it may not be the nicest of places. And we all know that where places are more unattractive, they tend to feel less safe and perhaps sort of get a reputation for antisocial behavior or littering. And in that sort of environment, you don't feel as safe. And then if you're on the bus or you're on the train and on your own and sort of young boys or men walking, you can feel certainly unsafe. If you look at the box there, the difference between male, females answers around security on public transport, which I know in Dublin we are getting, more men than women would see that as a necessity. The biggest difference between men and women was around the lighting and the feeling of safety where you are getting the vehicle, whether it be your bus or your train. So that's something to bear in mind, I suppose, particularly for city planners, for the NTA, when they're planning and working with the public realm around bus stops, train stops, and train stations. The other one around accessibility. So not every bus stop or train station has those real-time indicators. And I know a lot of us complain even when they are there, we get ghosted by them because, you know, it says 2 minutes, 1 minute, it's here, and suddenly it doesn't appear and it goes back to 30 minutes. And I think when you're planning a journey, and this is not just for women, it's for everybody, it's really, really important that our public transport comes on time, leaves on time, and gets us where we want to be on time. So that is a real game changer, I think, if that could be rolled out for everybody. There are financial implications if you're bringing 2 or 3 children, young adults with you, and you're not making the 2-hour limit that we have on being able to use the same ticket again. Disability and family friendly. So the idea of getting on the bus with a buggy, in a wheelchair, do all the buses lower down to make that easy for you? Are there grab rails? Are there clear signage there for disability seating or spaces for wheelchairs? So all of that. And I know a lot of the transport has improved greatly in that, but that is something that is much considered. The other thing when it comes to cycling and accessibility is segregated cycleways. They make you feel safer. You have that barrier between you and the traffic. And I have to say, I know people don't like the line on the road for cyclists. I actually do. I feel much safer if there's just a painted line on the road, compared to where there is none. It gives me a sense of this is my lane, and I have every right to be here. And I think it's a strong message to motorists as well to stay out of it. Space within, I've mentioned that. Comfort. So when you are on the bus, that it's clean, that it's well ventilated. That can be difficult in colder weather where you have the heating on in that public transport, but it may be just too much. So I think a sensitivity towards that. Also in overcrowding, women tend to be less tolerant of overcrowded spaces, just feeling a little bit vulnerable within that. The bigger stations, whether that be bus stations or train stations, if you're waiting a long time, it's always really good to have toilets and public conveniences at the same level, that you're not sort of lugging a buggy down the stairs to get to the toilet, or, you know, people in wheelchairs having to make do. So accessibility and reliability. We want transport that comes on time, that's dependable, and that's comfortable for us to use. Starting a family is a major mobility turning point where families, parents, adults may have up until this point been using public transport, been cycling, been walking. But when an infant or baby enters your life, the car becomes the go-to mode of transport because it's seen as more comfortable, it's easier. And I suppose you can pull over in the car and change a nappy or feed a baby without inconveniencing other people. But then you do like to get, as they start growing up, getting them into more active and public travel. So going to school is a key point. Some parents like their kids to cycle, but is that possible on the footpaths if there's no segregated cycleway? Are the cyclists on the segregated cycleway tolerant to children and indeed tolerant to slower cyclists? I find that myself sometimes, a little bit of bell ringing when I'm going so slowly along my way. When they get to school, is there enough cycle parking? Is active travel encouraged? The photo there of the school zone is from one of the Dublin City Council's school zone projects, where they painted lovely circles around the school. They put bollards up in the shape of pencils to discourage cars from parking and travelling in and around the school, particularly at peak times, and encourage a more attractive environment for children to walk and cycle to school. So I suppose some lessons for cycling and walking. You can see there women pushing their buggies, that equally could be dads, but space. Is there enough space on our footpaths? Are we building them wide enough, particularly around estates and bigger urban areas? A particular bugbear of mine is when the bus pulls in front of me as a cyclist. You know, a little bit of consideration there. Go slowly behind me. I'll be past the bus stop in a minute, but it's so frustrating. The other one is cycle parking. And I know there's a lot of cycle parking in people's workplaces, now more so in public car parks. But it's also really important that there's a lot of incidental cycle parking, particularly around local shops, cafes. For those little messages that you want to do, I'll pop down to the shop on the bike, I'll pop into town on the bike, and I meet my friends at coffee. I want, and I know it's very selfish, but it's the way cyclists think, I want to be able to leave my bike right outside. And it's not just convenience, particularly if you're in a big urban centre, it's because there's less likelihood it might be stolen or interfered with. And the last one there is about young children cycling. We really need to facilitate spaces, whether that be in parks or on our footpaths, to allow them learn how to cycle so that they can be more independent and make that trip to school. I discovered this document when I was researching a couple of years ago and I was trying as a local councillor to encourage my own local council to be more gender sensitive, and it's applying a gender lens to TII public transport projects. It's a short document. It's very much seen as a discussion document and a document for training, but it does acknowledge that designing for gender equality means creating spaces that feel safe and welcoming. And it has got 6, I suppose, areas there where they ask key questions. For example, on evidence and engagement, they remind those working on the projects, do you have data that is segregated between the genders? Have you discussed the project with local voices and you're aware of who's going to be using your cycleway or your new public realm and bus or train links? Communications. When you're communicating, are you communicating your images and and your project in a way that enhances involvement by everyone? So they talk about showing images of women standing at the bus stop on their own to show that this is a safe place. They show images that are attractive with families there to show that it's a good space, seating areas, all of that. So the surrounding plan, land and public realm, while they acknowledge it's not always, I suppose, convenient or regular that you can actually plan the areas around it because it may be in the jurisdiction of somebody else, but consideration should be made to making that public realm attractive. And I suppose the underpinning principle that they're working on is that we need to, I suppose, engage in placemaking for public transport, that it's safe, it's attractive, and it encourages use. So I suppose my final message here is around improving the system, is that we have more women involved in key decision-making roles at national, local, urban planning, and that we co-create with women and communities so that they listen to the experiences and listen to what makes them and encourages them to make this shift. More women actually in public services as drivers and securities. Design attractive public realm places that feel inclusive. Ensure that our real-time public transport information is actually in real time and that it serves us as we need it. Design child-friendly and disability public transport adjacent public spaces, and be supportive as a transport worker and bystander culture. And I think that's one that's not spoken about as frequently. I had occasion to host a meeting around the nighttime economy and getting people home safe. And one of the things I suggested to the employers of the nighttime economy was ask your female and your male, ask your employees, how are they getting home? If you could let them out 10 minutes earlier to get an earlier train or bus, that would make the world a difference instead of somebody waiting 20 minutes at a bus stop on a dark night. So it's all those little things that we can do that will actually help everyone co-create a better system and ultimately encourages many people across all genders, all ages, and all professions to make that shift to public and active travel. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well, Alison, for that wonderful presentation. Do we have questions? If there's anyone that has a question for Alison, please go ahead. You can raise your hand and you'll be called upon to speak, or you can drop your message or your comment or whatever it is that you have to say in the chat box and we'll read it out. Thank you once again. While we're waiting, in case anyone has questions, Alison, I'm just curious, do you know any city or country that has successfully implemented gender inclusive transport policies like this?
Yeah, Vienna is probably one of the most feminist cities that I know from housing, transport, and a lot of that is using the lived experience and designing transport systems, housing systems, a variety of other systems around the diversity of needs, particularly gendered needs. Another country that I think has done something really, really simple but very effective, in France, you can wave down a bus anywhere after 10 p.m. So, and I think that's particularly good for women, that you might not want to walk to the bus stop, and you can put your hands out, get the bus if you see it coming, and equally the bus will leave, and it is buses as opposed to trains, the bus will leave you nearer your house, not necessarily at the bus stop. And I think that's something that it would be wonderful to see implemented here. Something very simple, but obviously, you know, it may seem a little bit inconvenient perhaps to bus drivers. You could be stopping every 30 seconds, but I do think people, if they see somebody who's on their own, that they understand probably a little better that that's something, it's not a huge deal.
Yeah, that would actually be great. And finally, do you think there is any maybe connection between social norms and cultural attitude towards shaping transport systems that would probably be gender sensitive, maybe hindering or supporting?
I think it's very much comes down to the gender balance in the engineering projects and the systems design projects. I think if you have more women in that role, they bring a totally different lens, and even more so if they're women with children and or women with elders that they're caring for, that they can actually say, actually, can we look at this a different way, like that this, where we're positioning this bus stop isn't the nicest place to be. Is there any way we could position it a little bit up the road, nearer the lights, or just make the place more attractive? I think once you open that conversation as somebody that's involved, but also somebody who has a voice within that project. And I think a lot of the time, people can just think it in terms purely of the system, how it works, is it going to be on time, as opposed to the bigger picture where how people might feel within the system and using it. So I think that the gender balance within those decision-making processes is really important.
Once again, thank you very much, Alison, for your amazing presentation. Please don't forget, if you have questions or you have comments for any of the speakers, please go ahead and raise your hand, or you can use the chat box. We're going to move on now to our second speaker. I'll be sharing my screen again shortly. Okay, so you're going to be hearing from Cian Gill, who is the Climate Action Officer with Waterford City and County Council. So he has a background in ecology and public science communication, has worked alongside the council's climate team to help the council and county meet its carbon reduction and energy efficiency goals. Today, Cian is going to be sharing the Waterford Metropolitan Area Transport Strategy. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Edema. Okay, so I'm going to share.
Okay.
We'll stop your sharing, Edema. That's okay. And let me know if this comes up for everybody. Can everyone see my first slide?
It's loading. Perfect.
Okay, not too bad. So yeah, my name is Cian. I'm on the climate team at Waterford City Council. We're talking about the Waterford Metropolitan Area Transport Strategy. There's a lot to this. It's a big topic. Dima, by all means, give me the nod when the time comes if I'm going on too long. But my part in this is that us on the climate team, we work fairly closely along with the active travel team in Waterford Council. And so myself, I'm a fairly keen cyclist. I work alongside the active travel team on a few promotional schemes for, let's say, the cycling element to this plan, but it's a vast plan with different elements to it. So what are we talking about? And this is a strategy for creating an accessible, high quality, integrated transport network. And this has to allow for the expansion of the travel demand that we're expecting going up towards 2040. We need this to fit in with sustainable growth for the Waterford metropolitan area, which we're expecting to be the major growth engine for the region, the southern region, and an internationally competitive European city region. And this all comes from the National Planning Framework for 2040. 2040. So some basics about the plan. It's published by the NTA, the National Transport Authority, in 2022. There's a lot of bodies that have been involved in this. So the NTA, ourselves, WCCC, Kilkenny County Council, of course, you'll see in a moment, some of the area covered by this fits into Kilkenny territory, the Southern Regional Assembly and the Transport Infrastructure for Ireland. And under the National Planning Framework, there are metropolitan area strategic plans for other cities as well. So it's not just ourselves, this is something that's going on around the country. This is the area that we're talking about. So it's not just the inner city core of Waterford City. It does include that, but we're also talking about suburbs. We're talking about Ferrybank, much of which is, of course, within Kilkenny. We're talking about Passage East and Slieve Rue up in Kilkenny as well. So there's a lot of cross-border interaction required for a project of the scale to be successful. We're talking about an area of 143 kilometres squared and a population of almost 60,000, though those numbers are getting a little bit older now. It's worth thinking about what's in place for transport already within this area. We have intercity rail services, we have city, regional and expressway buses and coaches, and of course we have the local link services as well. So that gives us a little clue as to how things are currently. And this is the area also currently with regards to transport. And I'll just draw your attention there to the Green Line, being the Greenway, of course, which I utilise myself for some of my commuting. Over on the left-hand side there, you'll see Carriganore is one of our park and cycle spots, which I've been involved in a little bit of promotion for as well. So we have a lot of challenges for this. And we know that this metropolitan area, as we said, is expanded to grow by 50%, going up to 2040. We know that this is going to result in increase for demand for travel, and this needs to be managed and planned for carefully to maintain the attractiveness of the metropolitan area as a place to live, work and visit. There are a lot of plans that this is drawing from and also has to fit into. Of course, we're mostly aware of the Waterford Climate Action Plan coming from the National Climate Action Plan of 2021 with its carbon cutting emissions, which Edema referenced at the start of the session. This also has to be part of an integrated transport strategy in line with what we're calling the MASP, the Metro Area Strategic Plan for Waterford. And there's also the Regional Spatial and Economic Strategy for the Southern region. There's also, of course, development plans for the counties, for Waterford and for Kilkenny as well. So this has to fit in with the goals for all of those. Now, we have more local challenges here in Waterford. As with any city that backs up against a river, we have this issue of the limited strategic connectivity over the river, and we're pushed and we're quite limited in our north-south travelling there, as anyone who's been stuck in traffic on the quays in Waterford knows. There's not really a whole lot of ways of getting around that currently if you're travelling by car. There's a fair amount of attractive long stay parking across the city, and it's still priced relatively attractively. So that is still a kind of a go-to for a lot of citizens. I've said here an over-reliance on the private car. That is both a behavioural change issue, but also the result of, I think, a lot of what Alison was talking about, the genuine issues people have with public transport as well. And I would bring in all of her observations there, rather than just having a go at people who do need to use their car. But that is the story that has to be turned around. We do have a high level of car use for the school run in particular. This is hugely noticeable for any of us commuting into the city from elsewhere during the weeks when the schools are off. It's absolutely night and day in the difference. And the amount of other changes that have happened over the last few years with COVID, with blended working becoming more common, with work from home becoming common and now slightly less common for certain big businesses, I would have to say, from an anecdotal point of view, the school run is nearly causes a more noticeable difference almost in any of those. There is a limit in the number of high frequency bus routes, those being about 15 minutes or better. And another big issue is the rail service. So for myself, coming down from the north, I can't get into the city. I live right next to a train station, and I can't get into Waterford before 9:40. So that's another issue as well. And even for those of us living up along the train line, who would be ideally placed for that sort of commuting, it's currently not a very realistic option. And that's reflected here in some of these numbers. The current limitations on public transport show a fairly low mode share, what we call mode share, for certain kinds of sustainable travel. So the car is still the king there at 69. Cycling is fairly low. Public transport is fairly low. Walking is fairly high, and there are wonderful reports that came out in the last couple of years. The walking and cycling index for each of the metropolitan areas. Then the Waterford one is absolutely worth a look. And on the bottom right there, I've just dropped in one stat there that 76% of residents interviewed for this support building cycle tracks, even if they're physically separated from the traffic, as I think a lot of us would agree are the most pleasant form of them, even when that means less room for other traffic, which I think is very key, because we're putting in we're making these changes for the benefit of cyclists, let's say. It is coming at the cost of lanes for cars currently. It's very important to be upfront about that and bring people with you with these changes. Other local challenges here I've noted, just concern from the large employers that the existing public transport is not sufficient, and there is historically a legacy of car dependency. It's been mentioned already that whatever you're used to and whatever you're brought up with as a young person is probably what you'll continue to do. The existing cycle network, though it's being worked on now, as you'll see, it's fair to say it's fragmented. It's not entirely separated from roads, and it's far from a seamless experience for cyclists. So just a little bit about the bus lanes here, or the bus routes. I'll just say that one of the issues is that the way they are currently, very frequently they're going around in a circuit, whereby the way out is not the same way that you come back, and that this in questionnaires with the public has proven to be a bit of a barrier for people. They find it difficult to understand exactly where they're supposed to go, or if it needs to be explained to them in too much depth, then they kind of don't consider it an option, shall we say. So it's a point of confusion. Now there's 8 main strategy objectives within the WMATs, as this scheme is called. So we need to meet the demand that we're expecting from the future growth of the metropolitan area. We need to prioritise sustainable transport and active travel to reduce this car dependency that we've mentioned. We need to provide a high-frequency, attractive citywide public transport system. We need to increase the capacity of the transport system. We need to make this system accessible and inclusive in all the ways that we've been hearing about already. We need to enhance the public realm through demand management. We need to minimise impact of motorised traffic in urban areas, and identify and protect key strategic routes for freight in particular. So that's all of these different goals need to be met. Now, we've broken this down into certain modes of transport. So, and the WMATs scheme has something to say about each of them. So for walking, it includes actions for improving footpaths. The NTA, in conjunction with the likes of ourselves and local authorities in Kilkenny, Waterford, are looking to implement footpath improvement schemes across the metropolitan area where required. In particular, is an interest in facilities that link green spaces for walking. It sets out a goal to address deficiencies and crossing times. So that's got to do with improvements in traffic light timings. The implementation this is the big one of the Sustainable Transport Bridge, which is going to run from the Quays over to the North Quays and provide people of Ferrybank with a way to get into the city by walking or cycling, without having to go around Rice Bridge. So that would be a big improvement that's expected, I think, in the next year or so. They continue to implement behavioural change initiatives. So, for example, we're working on several safe routes to school, with changes to the areas of the road immediately outside schools, and behavioural change programmes linking with those as well. So we have a lot of goals here contained within the plan. I'll just take a quick look at some of them. So they're hoping to achieve a 55% increase in walking trips, and you'll see the baseline here is from 2016. The goal year is 2040. They have a specific goal there to the right of it for the AM peak period. So obviously a point of high traffic. If we can shift a percentage of people who are in the car but who would rather not be, or who would prefer to utilise a different route with improved facilities, that would make that improvement there. You've got the new Sustainable Transport Bridge. You've got 43 kilometres of upgraded footpaths. You've got expansion on the Greenway. And then you have all these other benefits that come along with this. Health benefits, your 20 minutes of activity a day leading to improvements in heart disease and type 2 diabetes. You've got investment for the bus connects as well. You've got the benefit of your town centres being more age-friendly, your schools being safer, your transport schools being safer, all of these wonderful knock-on effects. Also, we have goals here for cycling. So they are hoping to increase the number of daily cycling trips, again, by 2040. You've got, again, a goal, 8,000 for the AM, again, the peak period, which is when I would be doing my transport myself. So I've done it both ways, with the car and with the bike. And so I have ideas about the improvements that would be required there. You've got networks for the cycling routes. And again, you've got that improvement on the Greenway as well. So I'm just racing through this to try and cover as many bases as I can. This is the entirety of the proposed Waterford cycling network, with primary, secondary, and then lesser routes. At the moment, what's on the cards for now, and what's being funded and what's being worked on by the active travel team are these sections of it here. And so they've been carefully chosen to give this scheme a boost, I suppose, by connecting parts of the existing network and making them more seamless, shall we say, for getting around the city. Bus Connects is, of course, also part of this scheme. This is the NTA's programme to improve bus services, and a key part of government's policy to improve public transport. There's a number of elements to this. So in Waterford, they're proposing the building of a network of new bus and cycle corridors. The routes are going to be completely redesigned, and there's to be a new ticketing system, cashless payment, a change to the fare system, a new look to the buses, just to signal to people that this is a new system. New bus stops and sheltered. All of this is still being worked out at the moment, and myself and my active travel colleagues have been in meetings about this, and we've been involved in some of the public consultation for this as well, just to see what it is that people in Waterford are hoping for more precisely about where they'd like all of these new stops and routes to be. So again, we have a lot of numbers here, but we're talking about over 31,000 daily passengers by 2040, and over 7,000 passengers in the AM peak hour. And the whole system is aimed at being able to get people from where they live to where they work within 15 minutes. And so they have a breakdown of the city to show where the kind of highest levels of employment are versus the highest levels of where people are living. And so it's broken down in that manner. But the whole, I'll send this out to Adema so she can send it out to everybody. But there's a whole lot of numbers and goals there. This is the current iteration of the new routes, and rather than being circular and heading up in one way and coming back a different way, as much as possible, they're currently being designed so that they go out and they come back on the same route, stopping at the same stops, and so that should be something that should be more understandable to people who are not currently used to doing it. The system has the strategy has just a few things to say about rail. So on completion of the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review, the WMATS will support whatever conclusions it has regarding the potential for twin tracking, electrification of the Dublin to Waterford rail line, and the relocation of Plunkett Station to a new site in the North Quays. So this is currently underway with as part of the overall North Quays development, which is deep into the way at the moment. In terms of roads, there are a few principles that they're sticking to here. So the idea is that there would be no significant increase in capacity for private car trips on radial roads within the metropolitan area, except for a few exceptions, realignments, junction changes for safety reasons. But again, you can see that this would be different to traditionally how we have had principles for putting in roads. And road schemes will only proceed where it has been shown that alternative solutions that we would prefer can't effectively address the need. And then down at the bottom, there are a few schemes for the lifetime, road schemes for the lifetime of the strategy, moving out of the metropolitan area to surrounding towns. So again, I'm just going to wrap up here. So we have strategy outcomes overall and what's hoped for and being worked towards for the 2040 goals. So we're expecting population to increase up to possibly 93,000 there. The daily demand travel going from 192 to 264. A reduction in car emissions by 83% is the big goal there. And then you have your knock-on improvements on public health. You've got these reductions in particulate matter and NOx and pollution. And then again, you've got better improved accessibility for the population. And they have elements of 15 and 30-minute regions which the strategy is helping to get people access to in a more practical manner. And so I think that will take me to the end. Lovely. A lot of numbers there, folks, and a lot of different elements to the strategy. But hopefully that gives you a kind of a whistle-stop tour.
Thank you very much, Cian, for your presentation.
Stop sharing.
All right, thank you. So someone has a question for you here. I see Brian Keller agreed and said, I think it's an issue on my end as well, referring to one of the points you made. Our Tennessee is asking, are there solutions being looked at for those living in rural areas that need to drive to towns or cities, such as park and rides, etc.?
Yeah, so it actually includes a couple. Now, it's early days for this, but there's a couple of park and rides. I'll see if I can get the slide there for you now. Make sure that I get my. Let's see now. Yeah, so there's a plan for a park and ride at somewhere in the region of the N25 N9 junction at New Rath Road. So that would be for people coming into the city from the north. And so the idea would be, you could leave your car and come in from there, which would be wonderful for the likes of myself. And it's the sort of thing I think about as I drive or cycle around the city is where would I be comfortable leaving the bike and parking? Where are the realistic places for this? And so, for example, I currently do it from out west, as I showed on the map earlier. But it's a 25-minute cycle after I get down there. So it's good when I love doing it. It makes me feel fit. And when the weather is suitable, I think it's absolutely great. But yeah, there's a couple of spots that I would prefer to see one in the long term. So there's a few notes in there to that end. And there's a few locations being considered for this, but it is early days.
Okay, and Sean Clancy as well is asking, have Irish Rail or TFI been active stakeholders? Many areas seem to be getting pushback and lack of engagement, especially when it comes to rail times.
Yeah, so I would have to pass that one off to my active travel colleagues who've been more involved in that side of it. So I've been involved. I'd have to put that to them, and I can reach out, Sean. I'll let you know what the latest is on that.
Okay, and then the final question, what are the actions taken for safe cycling for school children? That's coming from Thomas Joseph.
Okay, so there's a couple of schools where they've put in the safe routes to school. We've done alterations to the roads just outside. You've got those pencil bollards. In some areas it has been reduced parking. There has been pushback on some of those, and so it was some of them were delayed. Now Active Travel have 2 or 3 programs for that in the can at the moment. There's a few more behavioural programs underway as well. So we're working with a school in Tramore who are doing a Stride School campaign, and we're on the verge of this has been quite successful with funding from Sanofi, actually one of the big businesses in the city. So we've been reaching out to businesses who might stand to benefit, I think, from, let's say, less traffic in the area for the benefit of their own staff, for the benefit of retail in some cases, although that's another can of worms. And so the promotion of the Stride schools done by the schools and very often by the students themselves, where you can get it. And another example was the walking bus is a new program that they're starting as well with one of the schools in town as well. So there's a lot of different elements to it. There's the hard engineering, and then there's the behavioural side. And I've been at meetings with, I'm not an engineer, I'm an ecologist by background. I've been at meetings with engineers from around the country, all saying that, it's behavioural stuff really that we need to learn more about, and we need to have better solutions for, which was an education for me to hear a room full of engineers say.
Thank you very much, Cian. It seems like a lot of people are really interested in this topic, and the comment section, there's so many questions, but we have one final speaker to take. So I'm proposing maybe if it's something you could type out some of the responses, Cian, in the comment section. Alison says, a great vision for a more sustainable Waterford. Cian, all the very best in realizing it. So Michael Flynn has a question here in the chat box. If you could just slot in a response. Thank you as well, Thomas Joseph, for joining us. His organization, Social Space Ireland, is the official Climate Pact partner here in Ireland. So we're moving quickly because of time, and I do urge us to kindly stay on for our final presentation. I know we're sort of behind, not behind schedule, I wouldn't say. There's still a bit of time. But if we could stay on as well and listen to Onyedikachi Onwusor, who is a multidisciplinary professional with expertise in energy, engineering, sustainability, and has been working with the Southeast Energy Agency since 2022, has contributed to advancing energy solution through feasibility studies, procurement, and project implementation. Now, because of time, I wouldn't get into all the background, but like I said, this meeting is being recorded. We will share the recording, upload on YouTube, and we will share all the presentation slides with you as well. So don't worry about, oh, how will I get this presentation? It's absolutely okay. You're going to get it. So over to you as well, Onyedikachi.
Thank you, Edima. I will just share my screen.
Okay.
Let me know if you could see that.
Yes.
Okay. I'm very glad that the previous speaker, Alison and Cian, touched so much on behavioral change. As Cian said there, it all comes down to behavioral change at the end of the day. And you might ask yourself, what is this behavioral change? Behavioral change just refers to modification in habits or decision makings to achieve specific goals. And if you're looking into energy sustainability, it involves adopting practices that reduce energy consumption, improve efficiency, and minimize environmental impact. Behavior change is very, very important in energy in sustainability because our energy demand is increasing day by day. So making simple behavioral changes can reduce consumptions on how we use energy, and also small and conscious adjustments in everyday activities leads to sustainable energy savings and lower carbon emission. And also encouraging sustainable habits ensures that long-term environmental and economic benefits are achieved. There are a few key drivers of behavioral change in energy use, which is stemming from awareness and education like we are doing now, just understanding how we use energy and how it affects sustainability in the long run. Also, monitoring and feedback, because when we have data that shows us how our behavioral change is impacting the energy use, we are much more on the track to keep track of what we do and also work more on it. And then there is also incentives and motivation. Just rewarding energy efficient behaviors encourages long-term commitment. You're gonna see that in this project, the Greener HGV project, as we go along. And also policy and organizational support. Government and businesses initiative can guide and reinforce energy savings behavior. I have this very saying at the very bottom there. I don't know where it's originated from, but it's very interesting. The greenest, most profitable energy is the energy you do not use at all. So the Greener HGV program, what is that? The Greener HGV program was funded by the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications under the Climate Action Fund to improve fuel efficiency among heavy goods vehicles through behavioral change. And as part of the project, we had 814 vehicles, over each of them over 7.5 tons. They were equipped with metering equipment, telematics to monitor driver performance and their fuel consumption. And the goal of the project is to reduce the fuel consumption by influencing the driver's behavior, with improvement expected in areas such as over-revving and harsh braking. And also there is this long practice of long idling with HGV drivers just leaving the truck on idling for a long time. That was also targeted through this training. So the program component, it involved installing the telematics. This is a system being put into the engine. It communicates with the engine ECU, so all the data is real life data, not you're not recording from meter points of like when you put the fuel in, it's what the vehicle actually consumed and what distance it covers. And also there were cameras and onboard driver assistance monitor put into the vehicle as well, just to keep the drivers on check when they are driving. And then we collected baseline data across over 12-week period, just to see how the drivers are driving before the training is done and the impact of that training after it's been done. So the eco driver training, there were online modules and then training sessions in person, where the drivers are being taught of how to drive better or how to merge onto the roads or exit the road, anticipating traffic just to reduce the harsh brakeness and the over acceleration there. And then there is the ongoing measurement, verification, and reporting in the project. So what are the key findings from this project? We discovered on average, we are seeing 3% fuel savings across all the projects. And that's 3% might sound very little, but if you look at the actual liters of diesel saved, you're looking at over 520,000 liters of diesel across 814 vehicles in a space of 2 years. That's quite a lot of fuel, and it's estimated at 1,390 tons of CO2. For comparison, just at the bottom there, you could see that 1,000 tons CO2 is equivalent to driving 5 million kilometers in an average petrol car. That's quite a whole lot of journey, or 5,000 one-way flights from London to New York. And for cost saving, which the fleet operators are more interested in, the program have saved over 900,000 euros in fuel cost, which is very, very substantial. And also there are seasonal variations in impacts of this training. So low seasons or peak seasons, there we see very little savings because these drivers are under a lot of pressure to deliver. So kind of the behavioral change you're trying to implement there goes out the window. And then also something that we weren't monitoring in the project. The fleet managers actually reported this themselves. They were seeing reduced number of wears and tears in their vehicle components like the brakes and the tires, which if you've ever dealt with HGVs, that's quite a huge cost on them. And it was pleasant enough to discover that due to the positive behavior change from the drivers, there's a reduced wear and tears on all those components. So the corrective actions and improvements and takeaways from the project. From the project, we see that after the first 3 months of the training, the impact of the training tends to diminish. So there is always need to be refreshed. The coaching needs to be refreshed because we are all humans. We forget what we don't practice so much. And then fleet manager engagement, this is really important in the project as well, because if the fleet manager is not interested in the project or interested in behavioral change, the drivers, they don't tend to budge. But once the fleet managers are engaged with it, you see positive results from the training as well. And also a more robust baseline data, 12 weeks of baseline, that's 3 months. It doesn't really cover the whole driving behaviors of what you would expect over a year time. So ideally a year baseline data would be much more ideal. And then also the key takeaways from the program as well is that the driver behaviors, it plays a very crucial role in fuel efficiency, and then continuous monitoring and coaching are also necessary to sustain these savings. So this is just kind of a snapshot of the program. This one, the off-fleet percentage savings. This is kind of how there are 31 fleets in this project. So this is how they performed. It's important to also note that not all fleets or all vehicles are going to make savings. Some are not going to make savings because just going out on site to interact with these drivers as well, you could see with the older drivers who have 15, 20 years of experience driving HGV, you can't really teach them new tricks. So they will have to also account for that when we do behavioral change. So not everybody can be influenced, but among the younger drivers, less than 5 years of driving experience, they are keen to learn new skills. So they are the ones actually driving those changes. Like Alison mentioned, it's good to teach our children these things. So the new guys coming on board is actually good. They are the right ones to engage with these programs like this. And then the top fleet there, you could see we've been monitoring them from July 2022. And you could see after the first 3-4 months, the training starts diminishing. It diminishes so much that we had to get on site to do series of driver coaching again with them. And then you could see it starts improving. And then also you could see the peak drop in the savings there are during the Christmas period. So during seasonal changes, that's pressure on the drivers, how busy the roads are and how much drops they have to make. That kind of impacts their training as well. And the bottom fleet there is this shows a very good example of where fleet manager engagement really works. Like you could see this fleet, they weren't making any savings for the first 3 months of their training. So we had to get on board there and engage with the fleet drivers. They have 7 vehicles in their fleet, and we discovered that they have one really good driver, but the driver was on a very worst track. So from some operational changes, the best driver was put on the route that has potential to make more savings. And you could see that just that little changes like that, it does a lot on the fleet. And because the fleet manager is engaged, so we were able to achieve something like that, and it reversed the savings they are seeing there. So that's basically me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Onyedikachi, for your presentation. You have a question here from Art Hennessy. Can local authorities join the Greener HGV program? Are any local authorities already taking part?
At the moment, we don't have any local authorities on the program, but this program could be rolled out to any local authority interested in having it for their fleets.
Okay. If anyone has any more questions for Onyedikachi, please feel free to indicate. Alison says, this makes so much sense, Onyedikachi. I remember when petrol prices increased, drivers started driving more slowly to conserve petrol, especially on the motorways. Most people drove around 100 kilometers per hour, which was considered optimal for fuel saving. The challenge for HGV drivers is that they aren't always paying for the fuel.
Yeah, so that's where the fleet managers has to come on board, because if your fleet manager is engaged, there are some other fleets I couldn't go through all of them. Some of them implemented some schemes, so the best drivers, because they get driver reports, the best driver for the month gets kind of a €100 voucher, one for all. So it kind of made all the drivers kind of being competitive and wanting to get that voucher. So stuff like that could also make a big difference.
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. We are wrapping up this webinar. Just a few messages. Once again, if you just joined in, I'm happy to let you know that we are going to share the presentation with you, so not to worry, okay? And just a few information. Climate Pact activities are really going on in Ireland, and it's really full scale. So please feel free to visit the website. You can catch up with podcasts, you can catch up with the other webinars as well. The links are all provided there. But you might be wondering, what is that little thing I could do in my own little way or my own little space? Well, I'll tell you, you can capture your climate action. You can host a group activity. You can take your own individual action. You can engage with your local authorities, and you can always spread the word as well. We put out a lot of posts on social media, so you can go ahead and just repost everything that we post. And activities coming up very soon. We have the Climate Pact Ireland National Conference 2025. Hooray! This is going to be in collaboration with the European Commission representation here in Ireland. So I do encourage you, if you haven't registered, you can go ahead to register. You can check that link. Like I said, this is going to be shared, and see the highlights of 2024. Currently, actually, it's sort of sold out, but then there is a waiting list. So we can consider people on the waiting list. You can jump on and register. It would be great to be there. You're going to have people speaking to you from local authorities, councillors, our Climate Pact ambassadors, representatives from DECC, DG Klima as well. We'll be there, Senator Malcolm Noonan as well. So it's a highly packed event you do not want to miss. Our 7th and final Lunch Talk webinar is coming up on the 10th of April. And we're going to be looking at unlocking energy grants for home retrofits. I encourage you as well to please join. We also have a Walk for Climate Phase 2 coming up. Drums roll, yay! Highlights of Phase 1, 2 is also available for you to go and look at. So finally, please, we encourage you to send us feedback. If there's something you think we can do better, go ahead and scan, and it's also going to pop up after this presentation. I also want to finally say thank you so much for staying with us till the end of this presentation. It was super duper great having all of you stay here. Okay, seems we have one comment here. Trying to move through screens to see. Okay, Alison says, thanks, financial inventives always effective. word for the day. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in this lunch talk. We hope to have you again. A big thank you to all our speakers, to our pact partner who joined us. Have a beautiful day, everyone, and see you at Lunch Talk 7.
Thank you. Bye.